Claude Code changed coding forever, and Cowork is about to do the same thing to regular business work. Cowork connects to your tools, your data, and actually does the work for you. I'm going to show you how Claude Cowork works using my e-commerce business with real data and real money. Let's go. Okay, so what is Claude Cowork? So in the stack, you have the Claude chat, and that's a brain, but it's not very agentic. Then you have Claude Code. Everyone loved Claude Code. Developers went nuts. And then other people in other business departments started coming up with other use cases outside of coding in Claude Code. But the problem with that is that you had to be in a terminal and it was a little bit technical. So that's where Claude Cowork comes in. So Claude Cowork is less intimidating because there's no terminal to play in, but it can connect to your files. It can now connect to your systems. It can read your data, and it has a bunch of skills that can really take it to the next level. So what Claude Code did for developers, Claude Cowork is about to do for the rest of the department and other kinds of work. All right, so before we dive into Cowork, why now and why is now the time you should be jumping in? To back up, in December, Anthropic and OpenAI both came out with major model upgrades, and the world really took notice. So some of the top software engineers started saying that these models are super legitimate. It can do basically all of their tasks that they're doing right now as a software engineer, almost with no intervention. So with that momentum, it seems like Anthropic has really shifted gears to start diving into other areas of work. And so with Claude Cowork, they're starting to dive into areas like finance, accounting, marketing, business development, and legal. Okay, so let's jump over into Claude Cowork. So to get Claude Cowork, you have to download the Claude desktop app, and inside the desktop app you have your regular chat. You also have Claude Code through the desktop, and then you also have Cowork, and Cowork's what we're going to be focusing on. And so there's really three things that I want to go over before we jump in that are all key to running in Cowork. So the first is that everything you're doing in Cowork is going to be within a folder. So this is similar to Claude Code, but it's an easier interface. You're not in the terminal, but you just have to connect to a folder, and you can think of that as your working place. So all the documents that you want to give context is going to live in there, and that's where all the work is going to be taking place. So to start, you can just say click in a work in a folder, and I'm going to go to one for the company that we're going to work on. And then from there, you can just start chatting. So I had started by putting a few documents in here. So the big thing about Claude Cowork, it has full control over everything that's in that project. So it can move files, it can rename files, it can create files. So it can do anything it wants to the folders, to the files that are in that folder. So to get started, we'll just say, can you tell me what's in this folder? All right, so it figured out that we have a handful of files in here. So I have a bunch of files, and what I'm gonna do is a bunch of work on my e-commerce business, which is a small lifestyle brand out of New England named the Golden Cod. So I have some Shopify data, I have some financial data from QuickBooks, and then I also have some like brand guidelines and context about the brand. So I think that's the most important thing that you want to do. So when you start a project in one of these folders, you just want to brain dump as much context as possible. So if you're doing it at work, you want to talk about your job, your company, how your job relates to your department, how your department interacts with other departments around the company, who you report to, the kind of projects that you're working on. Just get everything in there so that it has good context to work through as you start tackling more and more tasks. So that's what I did here with the brand reference and the visual identity. So then I can say, get an understanding of the Golden Cod with the brand reference and the identity documents, and then give me a summary. So it read through that, and then now I'm confident that it has an understanding of what the Golden Cod is. And that's going to set the foundation for the rest of the work that we are going to continue on. So then, like I said, within projects, Claude Cowork can move and interact with files. I asked it to organize the documents into subfolders, and it broke it out into 3 subfolders: brand, financial, and orders and inventory. So that was done. And that's really the gist of working in a project. And so next I want to talk about how you can take things to the next level with skills and then plugins. So to see skills and plugins, you're going to want to go to your settings, and then inside capabilities, go to customize. Okay, so we have skills and we have plugins. So first, skills are like a playbook that you can rerun. So if you have a recurring task, you can create a skill to do that task the next time you want to do it. So you can get a feel here for like a built-in Slack creator that comes out of the box with Anthropic. but so you can just see it's a toolkit to provide utilities on creating animated GIFs optimized for Slack. So if you scroll through, it has scripts, it has, what else does it have? Available utilities, and then it has a philosophy and a dependency. So you get the idea, but basically you can build, if you're doing something repeatedly, instead of having to manually go through it every time, you can create a skill, which is really like a playbook. And then that skill can be launched with a request. So in the Slack GIF creator, you can see that this is going to get invoked if the user says, make me a GIF of X doing Y for Slack. So that is a skill. And then you can also you can download skills and you can also create your own skills. And I'll go through that later in this video. Where skills go, and to take it to the next level, they go into plugins. So plugins are a collection of skills, tools, and connectors. So if I look at, and same thing, you can add plugins, and here are the Anthropic and partner plugins, but there's a bunch, and this is what got the markets all spooked. They kept coming out with new plugins like for data, for operations, for finance, for marketing, for sales, for legal. And so all the SaaS tools in this space, they took a hit because people were wondering, if Claude can just do it, why are we paying all this money for all these SaaS tools when it seems like we can just have a Claude subscription and just do it here? Okay, so to give you an idea of what's in a plugin, so if we look at the finance plugin, so you can ask questions like this, gives you an idea of the type of analysis you can do, but prepare month-end journal entries, analyze budget variances, prepare SOX compliance, and then you can also have commands. So we have these slash commands that build, in this case, an income statement, and it looks like it has journal entries, reconciliations. And then you can see that we have this plugin is made up of 6 skills. So that kind of gives you an idea. And then you can also have connectors inside plugins. Anthropic's Finance has these connectors built in. So that was another update that came out this week. So Anthropic's offering more and more connectors, which I think is going to make work a lot easier across the board. Being able to connect Claude and the power of Claude into the tools that you use on a daily basis is really going to change things. So that's skills and that's plugins, and you can download both from Anthropic. And then for skills, there's skills marketplaces online, or you can just create your own. Okay, so that's enough for the overview. So let's dive into the actual demo. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to do some more traditional financial analysis. So I have all of my QuickBooks financials exported. I have all the transactions from all time, and I also have the 2025 profit and loss statement. So we're going to do a quick analysis. In the folder, I have a quick-based profit and loss and a full history of transactions. Give me an honest assessment. What's the state of the golden cod, revenue, trends, margins, anything that stands out. Okay, and then so we have our analysis, which looks great. It fits the story that I was expecting. But when we first started, we had a lot of energy to put into this, but over the years, we've been pulled into different responsibilities, so we haven't had enough time to put into it. But yeah, we can see the revenues going down. We stopped using wholesalers, and then I did figure that the gross margin should be improving, even though we're making less money, because I thought we were doing a better job with expenses. But then this was interesting. So it pointed out that Shopify fees are really painful right now because we don't have that much volume, but we're still paying the subscription. And then, yeah, so it pointed out that seasonality we've always had, but is getting more and more extreme. So we have less sales going on throughout the year, and it's really focused on our holiday sales push. And then, so I had a different video on this, but I used Claude to build out a digital advertising plan during the 2025 holiday campaign, and it was able to pick that up just from the financials. So that's really cool. And that worked. So that's great. And then, so to take it a step further, what were our top 3 expenses eating into our margin? Where are we bleeding money? Where we shouldn't be? Okay, so it pointed out that our biggest expenses are QuickBooks, Shopify, and licensing and permit fees. And I knew this was something that we're going to have to address this year, because if we're not having that many sales come through, we're not sure if we want to sell the business or just keep it dormant for a while. But if that's the case, we definitely have to shut down these expenses. But this pointed out that QuickBooks and Shopify and the license and permit fees are our most expensive items right now. And actually, so we came up with recommendations on how we can lower this to go to lower tiers. So that I will definitely be doing. And then also it brought up a fourth, which was bank charges. So that's great. Okay, and then so to put a bow on this section, so we're going to summarize the findings into a 2-paragraph email I can send my wife, who's the other co-owner of the business, with next steps. All right, way too wordy, and hey babe is crazy. That's not something I would say, but okay, so there we go. We did a deep dive into our financials. We identified 3 of the biggest expenses, and we have next steps on how to address these. So let's move on to the next feature, which is the Claude Chrome extension and using that with Claude Cowork. So let's get started. All right, so to use the Chrome extension, you have to make sure it's installed. So if you go to your name on the bottom left, you can click the download, and there is an option to download the Chrome extension. So one thing to note before we do this is where you can get into trouble with prompt injecting. So if you're going to have Claude go out to the web and start looking at websites, that's where people can go in with bad intentions to try to prompt inject Claude. So you just want to be mindful of that. If you're using this at work, it's probably not the best idea in the state that it stands right now. So I think if you're just interested in tinkering and messing around, just know that in the back of your head that this is an area where prompt injection could come into play. But for this, I feel good with the use case. Okay, so I'm going to have it browse our website, pretend you're a first-time customer, what's confusing, what's missing, what would you like, what would make you leave without buying, look at the product descriptions, pricing, navigation, mobile layout. To be brutally honest, I can take it. I'm going to say to use the Claude Chrome extension. So let's do what we get. Okay, one thing to note is that you have to make sure the Claude Chrome extension is actually turned on in your Chrome browser. Okay, so we can see the orange highlight on the tab, but Claude is controlling this tab right here and looking through the website and taking screenshots. Okay, so that took a little bit, but we did get an output. So we had so Claude went through, looked at each page, looked at the products, the descriptions, and came up with some action items. So let's see, if we go down to, yeah, the bottom line. So if I land on this site from Instagram or a friend's recommendation, it has a nice logo, a bunch of t-shirts I can get anywhere. Oh, $150 necklace with no description. So that's not good. And we still have our holiday gift guide in February. We got to figure that out. So it's pointed out some things that I can fix. And so that's exactly what I wanted. So that's awesome. Okay, so next I want to start building out some competitive analysis. Not that we're really competitors because we're so small, but just to get an idea for other New England lifestyle brands and what products they are offering and the price point, and compare that to ours to make sure our pricing is in line. And so the biggest kind of New England coastal lifestyle brand is the Black Dog. So if I'm gonna try to see if Claude can help me research the Black Dog, what products they sell, what their price ranges are, so that way I can start keeping track of this. Okay, so I kicked it off, and since I had just used the Chrome extension on the previous analysis, it went to go use that again. That took a long time, so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see if it could just use web search, but it actually could not. Black Dog blocks, I think, bots from crawling their site. So that didn't work. So I said, okay, use the Chrome extension. And it did use the Chrome extension, and it was able to navigate the site, and it actually went a lot faster than when it did navigated my site. So I'm not sure what sped up there, but this happened in a couple of minutes. So that was really cool. And then it inventoried all of the items that they sell into the different categories. And then it compared what they sell versus what we sell. So as an example, you can see their t-shirts go for $24 to $46. Ours are $35 to $42 and down the line. And then it actually had some really solid advice going forward. So we don't have any impulse buy products, items under $30. We don't have any drinkware. That's a massive missed opportunity. It said stuff about like dogware, or dog products, but that's more for Black Dog, I think less for us. And then bags and totes. That's something that we've always wanted to do. We're sold out right now, but that's saying that's a huge opportunity. Yeah, so that's awesome. And then I can use this going forward. So next, let's go into actually building out a skill so you can see what that looks like. And then so the cool thing about skills is that Claude can actually help you build the skill. So I'm just going to drop in a prompt, and I'm going to build out a skill to help me do inventory reorders. So that's something that's a huge pain for me. I'm really just guessing. I have no idea really what products I should be ordering. So this is going to be my attempt to narrow that and really dial that in. So I'm going to have it look at our sales for the last 30, 60, 90, and year. And then it's going to check the current inventories levels, which I've provided. And then it's going to create a bunch of metrics and then provide the analysis. So let's see what that brings us. Okay, so Claude is working on the skill. So it built the skill and now it's testing it. And so to test it, it spun up 6 different sub-agents, 3 with the skill and 3 without the skill, and ran them in parallel to see how it's going. So that's pretty cool. So you can kind of get a sense of, you can really have this go nuts with sub-agents also, and you can see the various steps that each sub-agent is taking. Okay, so Claude gave me a look at the evaluation of the skill before we completed, but just skimming it really quickly, it had a executive summary with next steps, which is great, but it identified the 3 most important items that I need to do a reorder for. So yeah, this is awesome. So we'll finish out the skill. Okay, so it finished it, and then we're just going to move it to our skills. So copy to your skills. All right, and then if we go look at the skill to see what it built. So now in our skills, you can see my skills. This is the one that it just created, and we can get an overview of what it's doing. So you can scroll through. We have our data sources with the files that we had provided in the folder in the project that we're working in, the step-by-step workflow, and then it has rules at the bottom. So yeah, so this gives you an idea of how easy it is to create a skill of your own for no matter what project or what workflow you're working on. And the beauty of it is that Claude can just help build it for you. And then so there's also full marketplaces of skills that you can find online. So if you just do a quick search, you can find those. And the other thing to note there too is that you want to be careful and you actually trust who you're downloading skills from, because this is also an easy way for someone to, with like malicious intent, to inject something into a skill that you would then have on your computer. So just make sure that you're using skills from trusted sources. And even if you don't want to download them, you can just tell Claude, hey, here's a skill that I want to make. Just make this for me, copying what they have. So yeah, so that's the skill. And so let's actually test it here. So in the skill description, you can see what can set this off. So right here, we have reorder analysis. So if I chat reorder analysis, the skill should kick off. So we'll just test that. That's working really quick. Okay, so I asked it to run a reorder analysis. It successfully grabbed the skill and then it started running through. And then boom, we have our reorder analysis done with our new skill. So that's awesome. Okay, so I hope you got something out of this. I think this is an awesome tool. We're definitely still early. The updates from Anthropic are dropping, like I said, multiple times a day. But I think this is a really good opportunity for you to jump in now and get familiar with the tool to see what's possible. I've already used it a ton in my personal life and at work. But in my personal life last weekend, it saved me a ton of time wrapping up my year-end prep for my tax returns. So I have a couple, I do the bookkeeping for my wife's business. We have the Golden Cod and then all of our personal stuff. So I was able to go through QuickBooks really fast to close out the books with it. And then I also had it help me do a ton of analysis with all of my personal bank statements. So that, I don't know how many hours that saved me, but I'm tens and 20 hours maybe that would normally take me. And that took me about an hour to go through all my personal stuff and then 2 businesses. So I think you can really save a ton of time with this, and it's just a lot of fun working with. So it's definitely worthwhile downloading and get going. And then if you download it and you don't really know where to start, I think a good place for inspiration is the Anthropic plugins that they already have. So if you're in the customization window and you go to add plugins, you can browse a bunch. But just as an example, the marketing Anthropic plugin that they already have, you can get a sense for things that you can do with marketing. So drafting blog posts, build a cross-channel performance report, and that can just spark your creativity and you can just work from there. And then you can always take these skills and have Claude customize them to more of what you're doing. So this is really just a template and you can customize this however you want. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you got something out of it, please leave a like and subscribe. Leave any comments, if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas for other videos that we can do with Claude Code. But I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.